go. That would be
Unfortunately,
perfect.
I just hit record, so I'm gonna have to have to make Rob do that take all over again. But
let,
Okay,
let me
let's
let me
do it
post
again.
the let me
Perfectly
post.
natural. Just do it again.
You can title this video "Snare Bears Tell Everyone How the Meta Should Be."
No,
oh
Okay.
wait, before we get started, can I just get like everyone to quickly say their name very quickly so I have that for the recording?
Hi,
Also,
my name's Eric. I'm White Blade. Played a bunch of Netrunner, won some tournaments. Mostly focused on competitive play. I exclusively play standard.
Yeah. Patrick, Rotom Appliance, also play standard, also competitive play. Played a few games.
won a few
Rob
things.
Gronkopf. I balance the standard format that these guys claim to play.
That's really good. Rotation comes every year and a half now, it feels like. But with the release of Midnight Sun, we're gonna have set rotation again, which means that the big box expansion Order in Chaos and the expansion, all of the sets, all the card expansions from the Mumbad cycle are gonna rotate. We net lose cards, right? Because there's 120 unique cards in Mumbad, and there's
55 in
60,
Order and Chaos.
yeah, 55 in Order in Chaos. So that means, and there's only like, how many, is this like what, like 70? There's like 60 in Midnight Sun alone?
Yeah, there's 65 in Midnight Sun, so we're losing 100 and on this beautiful spreadsheet that Analyze Chris made. Because Mumbad cycle has the like limit 6 per decks, we only got 114 cards in that cycle. FFG really saving themselves from having to do hard design work.
That's funny.
So we're losing just shy of 170, and we're getting 65 cards in.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so we're gonna talk about rotation and some of the cards that leave. What archetypes are gonna miss them?
Well, wait, sorry. As a transition, though, I think it is important to note that so we're net minus 104 cards, but probably 70 of those are unplayable.
Yeah, when we go through this list, the number that just do not do anything is
Anything.
amazingly high.
I think that's actually really important to note. Right? Yeah, the average power level of a Nisei, like Nisei cards, it's like, maybe in a given faction, like 5 of the cards have a spot and like 2 of them don't have a spot, and it's like flipped. Do you guys want to start with Order and Chaos, and then we could look at the Mumbad stuff?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
so the big let's just look at Weyland Order and Chaos. So I remember buying Order and Chaos, way back when. I remember I was in the Safeway parking lot in my mom's car because we picked it up after work. I'm also like 16 in this story, and like I remember looking through the box and just being like, these cards are bad. Like the cards in Order and Chaos for Wayland are fucking bad, especially because it's like there was an understanding that like in Honor and Profit, there was an understanding that Criminal was going to get cards that were weird because Andy was busted, right? Like there was just like, oh, Crim's gonna get all this weird stuff because Crim's really good and doesn't need the help. And
Grim
then
has Andy, Desperado, and Account Siphon. It doesn't need anything else.
exactly. And then I think that happened with Honor and Profit. Like they got a bunch of weird stuff. It was good. And then we get to Order and Chaos, and Wayland historically at this point is just bad. Like it just hasn't been good since the core set. Basically, it's the joke, it's the laughing stock, and they were like, okay, we're gonna go all in on Advanceable Ice as a theme, and like it's funny because for people who play now, it's like Advanceable Ice is good because of Akat and like Pravados and like all these other triggers or whatever. But like way back when, Advanceable Ice was awful, and so many of these cards in Order and Chaos are just like unplayably bad for Wayland.
Order and Chaos really does feel like FFG planting their flag on like one of the Corp factions is never going to get any better.
Yeah, it's sort of like they're like, oh yeah, Wayland's the meme faction, like it's the faction for memes, because like looking at this, like the big 3 rotations out of Order and Chaos for me are the 3 IDs.
Yeah.
So Argus, Security, Gagarin, and Titan all rotate out of the game. Titan's been banned,
Yep.
but it's
Gagarin
essentially
was banned for
so
a
go ahead.
long time.
And then Argus, I think Argus has been like somewhere but like around tier 2-ish forever, basically.
Argus is the best fair ID in the game.
Yeah, I think it's like really good at exploiting decks that don't have like a coherent game plan. That sounds so rude, but it's true. It's just sort of like Econ Hard Hitting News just like gets a lot of decks that like just sort of like dawdle around and don't do anything. And it's had like placements at tournaments and worlds for like basically ever since HPT, High Profile Target came out. I think
It
the
felt like
big
it was tier 1, wasn't it, for sort of a certain period? It hasn't been for a little while, but
Yeah,
like
like
2019 or something, it was
2019.
that tier.
It was quite
It was
good,
a
and
good,
then it's
it's a
been
good Corp. Yeah, now it's been
yeah,
sort of not great, but
and it was
it's
sort
just
of
funny how all three of these were terrible when they came out, and they've all had their time in the sun since.
I think the biggest loss here in the Weyland cards is actually Gagarin Deep Space, because you can sort of play the Argus game plan out of Outfit, and you can sort of play the Titan game plan out of Jemison or out of Built Elastic. It's a lot worse, but like you can still do the fast advance thing. You still have the cards in the faction. The Gagarin thing is like Weyland asset spam has been a thing for a while, and there are some powerful assets in this set. And so there's this question of like, okay, is there going to be an asset spam deck in Weyland? And I think it's hard without the Gagarin ID ability. Just because like if all your cards can be like accessed and trashed with no penalty, like they'll just run and trash all your things. Like a good player will just run and trash everything you install. And the only thing you really have to back it up as a threat is hard hitting news. So
There's also the fact that like runner asset tech is really good right now and flexible enough that like Miss Bones is good at trashing upgrades in remote servers as well as all your assets if you happen to be an asset spam deck. So there's not much deck building, like there isn't much of a trade-off to putting a couple of asset spam tech cards in your runner decks.
yeah. Ultimately, I think that these cards rotating, Weyland is like fine. Like Weyland as a faction is like, this is okay. They're not really hurt that much by it. They don't lose much. They lose Gagarin, I think, but like I'm just looking through these cards. There's nothing else here that like we really.
Oh,
think
what are you talking about, Eric? High risk investment?
Government
Meta
takeover.
defining, man.
Hey,
Government take. There's
Orion?
two.
you know,
There's two
I
banned
will
cards in
say,
this set.
Ob would love Markiel. Like he would legit see Markiel played again.
Mark Yale, remember, is an asset, not an upgrade.
Yeah, but it can
Right.
tutor Rashida.
I'm just saying for tutoring Rashida.
Okay.
It's like, yeah, and then it's just like, oh, the Constellation Ice was a really neat well, it was a fun idea. I had fun games against them, but they were never good. And that's basically like all that they got was like these cards, these really bad cards. Housekeeping, I remember seeing play because I was a Shaper player. It was the end of the world every time, but then like it was never relevant because you could play other decks that were good. And like Traffic Accident was okay outside of Weyland. CVS was okay, basically always outside of Weyland. But
so then we have Order and Chaos for Anarch. So I think alternatively, like if we want to look at the set historically, I think Anarch is really the start of like the faction starts to shape up. It starts to gain an identity besides we're the faction that just plays Liberated and sometimes splashes the Count Siphon. Where it's like now they got a lot of tools, they have identity. So this is the set that Ed Kim, Max, and Val have all seen some. Like Ed Kim, I would argue less, but Max and Val have basically been like central pillars of the. Yeah, exactly. The centerpiece IDs. I've had worse. Has been in a 3 of an every Anarch deck since the set came out. And then there's a bunch more specific stuff. So there's Day Job, which was like an econ piece played in like a variety of different Anarch strategies. It's also been splashed at One Influence. Wanton Destruction, which is this kind of a soft reprint of Wanton Destruction in the form of Chachushka. It's like different, but it's the same idea of like HQ pressure. We also lose the Cutlery, which is Fork, Knife, Spoon, and Eater. So in my view, a big deal because it's like it hasn't been good recently, but like at different points in the game's history, it's been like a pretty potent ice destruction suite. And then a bunch of like sort of cards that haven't seen mainline competitive play. Hive Mind recently with the Hive Mind Max has
Yeah,
been
Eater. Yeah, we also passed over Eater there, which like isn't
Oh, Eric
relevant
said
now.
eater.
But
He just ate his
okay.
words.
sorry.
That's my
Eater
bad.
Eater yeah, the thing is interesting about Eater's good with the knife fork spoon, but also like we would have been able to use Eater to land Chashushka in this set. But
I
now we
don't
can't
think
because
eater.
of
I don't think eater is good with the
was
cutlery. Maybe it was at some point. Eater's just good with APOC.
It was good with
Yeah,
APOC and
Eater's
good
good
with
with
Account
APOC.
Siphon was the other big
Yeah.
card that you would do. Like that
Totally.
was a long time was the it wasn't quite the anatomy of an Anarch decks, but like those like
Keyhole siphon type stuff. It was
Keyhole Siphon was
it
just
was
like
good in that at some point.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's interesting because looking at these cards, it's like, oh, Anarch loses a lot, but they've really actually gotten reprints in, like essentially like reprints in Midnight Sun. So normally, if we were missing I've Had Worse or Wanton Destruction, I'd be like, those are big misses. But Chashushka is kind of the same thing, a bit different. I think it's a lot worse than Wanton Destruction outside of the decks, the Sabotage deck.
Yeah.
I've Had Worse is a big miss, but we have Steelskin Scarring now, which is like comparable.
It's a weird
it's
side
comparable
grade.
to I've Had Worse.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this the only way it's not a side grade is that like I guess does not drawing 3 cards on damage matter?
I guess it doesn't too much at the moment because we switched to Boom. Like at the time I've Had Worse and Traffic Accident like was some relevant interactions, but like now everyone just does like in all of the damage in one chunk or like you live. So
The only difference
we're also
I was just stuffed Scorch Kill at the time. That was a big thing. It just fucking ruined
Yeah.
Sea Scorch as a strategy.
we're in the timeline where Anarchs are playing moshing unironically.
yeah.
So I think Steelskin is like, it's not really a side grade. It's definitely not an upgrade, but it's doing something different in a lot of decks.
I think my takeaway on the Anarch Order and Chaos stuff is like the IDs losing the IDs are pretty bad. Losing Max is like you play Max in this new meta. Like Max Max is like one of the best decks.
Yeah.
Max is really, really good. Val has not been good recently, but is like still a solid ID. Mining Accident is still in the pool. I think they got reprints where they needed to, and then like they just lost a bunch of their weird stuff. Eater is a big loss, but like I think they're gonna be fine.
I have a soft spot for Vigil because of limited formats.
Vigil's great.
And just establishing that a console that gives you 1 MU and a medium ability costs 2 to install.
Yeah.
I guess it's worth just wondering whether these virus decks are still going to be viable without Hive Mind and Progenitor, whether we're going to see that played out of, I don't know, Lou or some other
that
ID.
Deck I think that, like, the Hive Mind Max deck just disappears completely. Like, it's so dependent on everything coming together. I think probably we might see I could see a world potentially where Freedom could come back again. But like that's a different
deck, maybe.
That's a turtle deck. That's like a Freedom engine deck rather than a like this Hive Mind Fermenter Tranquilizer kind of.
I think the thing is all of the like virus decks aren't using the cards from the set. Like I mean, like when I think of virus deck, I'm thinking, okay, we're playing like Knob Curry, like Consume, Imp or whatever, and like none of those cards are in this set. I think the big takeaway is that like Hive Mind being gone just essentially kills a tier 2 runner archetype completely, because the whole conceit of that deck is that you're using Hive Mind plus Conduit as a late game inevitability engine, and now you just can't do that anymore. Let's talk about the neutral Corp cards that are rotating from Order and Chaos. So there's not much to talk about here. It's Sub-Boost Dedication Technician Team Cyberdex Virus Suite. Sub-Boost Dedication Technician Team is like they're unplayable, always have been.
No relevant game text.
Yeah, and then Cyberdex got a reprint in Midnight Sun under Mavrius.
Mavirus.
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 Is it? It's not actually called Mavirus, is it?
Yeah, it's Mavirus.
Mavirus.
Okay, so I will say that is maybe the worst decision DSA's ever made. I think I think it's fine. It's going to be in the game, still a cost and influence for everyone except Jinteki, which I think is going to make Corp decks broadly slightly worse. But I think it will be fine, and like people will find the slots. Probably a downgrade. I mean,
Yeah.
I just think broadly, like there's this question. I think the question of like how Mavrius will fit in is separate from the rotation question. I guess it's just like this effect is still in the game.
Yeah.
It's accessible, and so like it's not that big a loss on rotation.
Yeah, nothing of value was lost here.
So
On the runner side, we lose.
Nisei already soft rotated uninstall by changing the console rule.
We also got rejig, so like uninstall looks even sillier now.
God damn it!
And
Data
then there's
folding,
data folding.
which I think was so like Sunny, right?
It's
I
a
think
prison
Sunny-
card. It doesn't matter if it's Sunny or anyone. It's a prison card.
Coming in hot, Rob.
I just think that the Sunny players, all four of them, actually will. This is actually a big deal because you already lost Underworld contacts, right? So now you can only drip 3 with Hozeki instead of drip 6, which I know, like, oh, we all hate prison decks, but like that's a big deal, especially because if you think the meta is gonna be slower, Sunny's a good call. So yeah, I think losing data folding is a big hit for that deck actually.
But I think if you think the meta is going to be slower, play a faster deck.
Yeah, but there are those people that just want to play Sunny every time. So like this does suck for them for sure.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Okay. I think we're good to start talking about the actual Mumbad section. I think the takeaway in Order and Chaos is it's fine. It's actually not going to be missed that much because they've been targeted reprints.
Basically, the biggest losses are going to be the IDs. Those did not get like direct reprints. Everything else from those boxes either was not seeing a lot of play or got saved.
And I think that like there is something to be said for, people who wanted to build their like vehicles theme decks, losing Kyanju PT and stuff.
And I think that's what we just said.
The boat's a vehicle.
Yeah, there is a new vehicle. You're right.
Okay, so let's talk about HB. Let's talk about Mumbad. What Mumbad loses in HB. What HB loses in Mumbad rotation. So there's the big 3. I'll just say them. Everyone can like get your tissues ready because we're all gonna weep tears. So we lose Lakshmi Smart Fabrics, Advanced Assembly Lines, and Jeeves Model Bioroids.
Yeah.
This is like Eric. Sorry, which one of those was Voting Machine Initiative?
and Voting Machine Initiative, which Voting Machine Initiative is a bit player in like a tier 2 mirror morph deck. So like
another prison card rotates.
Actually, lateral growth is also relevant too. Not like super relevant at the moment, but
Brainstorm being like rotating. I don't think it was the most competitive cut. It's just like this was sort of like a weird win con. And so it's just like out of the game. It's just something to know because like there were decks, like the people were winning games and doing well in tournaments with decks that just like Heinlein served your Brainstorm or like ganked them into the Brainstorm or like whatever. And now you just can't do that. I don't think it's a super big miss. It's just like worth noting that that's out of the card pool and you don't have to worry about it. But losing. So this like it's interesting because I think one of the big takeaways we're gonna have doing this is like we just lose a lot of good assets from Mumbad.
Yes.
Because Mumbad was the asset cycle, and Jeeves is just like been fundamental to so many different Corp decks forever now.
Yeah, like Jeeves going, I feel like is like. And us not seeing anything that directly replaces Jeeves, like the game is just going to look different without Jeeves being available in the card pool.
Yeah, like, we might see more seamless launch trying to replicate the effect.
I think also like it's important to note that Jeeves was an alliance card, right? So like you were seeing it splashed on like CTM, for example.
Yeah.
And, that CTM and like
and Gagarin
to get extra clicks. Yeah, like all those like HB has a lot of ways. Like you can play seamless launch. You have other ways to generate those clicks. Jeeves was an effect that like people were splashing for, and it was like the only like really way in faction that they were getting extra clicks, which was really busted.
Yeah. No, it's like
It's
Seamless does one thing, which is help you score the 4-2s, but like often you were trying to trigger Jeeves like 3 to 4 times a game just to like get extra credits, get extra card installs, sometimes even draw extra times. Like this card was like I wasn't once I started thinking about rotation, it was like, oh shit, like Jeeves is everywhere and is doing so much for the corpse.
Yeah, even purging and then installing something.
Yeah,
against
exactly.
Turtle.
I think my takeaway on Jeeves is like essentially every go wide deck in the game has gotten slightly worse, because every go wide deck in the game wanted this effect.
Yeah.
It's like, and so I just think it's some of the like when people are like, oh, like there'll be an asset deck after like basically one of my theses for rotation is that assets decks aren't going to work. And one of the contributing factors for this, I think, is the fact that Jeeves is rotated, and it's a big power hit to the Corp factions.
Yeah, and
Also,
I think like
important assets from every faction are rotating, as well as important, like neutral assets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Advanced Assembly Lines is one of those cards. It's really good. It's been played in PD recently, but it's been played historically. It was played in ASA. It's like
It's Matthew's favorite alternative win con.
I don't know. So like this is really interesting. I was thinking about this, and I kind of want your guys' thoughts on this. How bad is it for HB that Advanced Assembly Lines rotates? Because to me, it always has seemed like one of those cards. It's like good. It's really good, but like it's not necessary. Like it's just like sort of icing on the cake to me. It feels like a lot of the time. But like unlike Jeeves, where it's like Jeeves is like, oh, this is like fundamental.
Yeah, I think Advanced Assembly Lines, like, it is slightly better than just a marginal econ card, but it is pretty close to a marginal econ card in a lot of cases.
Lateral growth is like a C minus, but AAL has the potential to be a B plus.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
like you're not gonna just cut your. You're not just gonna replace your. Well, you can't replace them with lateral growth, but like if you were not gonna just replace your Advanced Assembly Lines with lateral growth if you could.
I mean, I think PD misses this more than I think ASA. You can get by without it. You can play other good assets. I think PD has an immediate question, doesn't it? Like, what do you put instead of this?
Because you can't because you wanted to double dip on the.
Yeah, and none of the options are really ideal as far as I can tell.
NEH would also NEH that's trying to get Jeeves influence would also play AALs.
Could you get the Near Hub trigger on both turns?
Yeah, true.
And then the other sort of like the other big one is Lakshmi Smart Fabrics. This hasn't been good recently, but it's been good historically, and it's just a win condition that's rotating, right? Because you have a bunch of this is a way for HB decks to like, oh, you res a bunch of assets, you have the counters, they can't steal the agendas, and then you like fast advance out or like push in the remote or something. And now
like historically,
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you can go, Rob. It's fine.
Oh, okay. So I originally called it an alternative win condition, but I've realized that I think it's more accurate to call it an alternative to a win condition.
Sure.
For like wide HB decks that that want to figure out how to leverage a board state into a win without actually having like a way to end the game.
Yeah, my point was basically following that. It's like, oh, when you're looking at like wide like CTM or Gagarin, like the other like classical wide decks in the game, like those basically rely on I'm going to use assets to generate an econ lead, which then I can convert into tags in a kill or some other way to convert tags into a win. And so like that's how you leverage all this asset board state to get you ahead and turn it into a win. HB can't do that very easily, and so Lakshmi was sort of I wouldn't say the cornerstone, but like an option for them on how to turn these like economically ahead board states into a close kind of thing.
I think Big Deal, although it obviously does something quite different to Lakshmi, kind of fits in as a closer, a win con that allows you to leverage a board state into a win.
Yeah, it feels like it's in that same spot of like, okay, so like I have all these like I have like a massive economy lead and a board state lead, but like I need to win, and then like actually like it's like, oh well, like they can't steal your agendas now, and then big deals like, what if I just scored my agendas? I think that the types of decks, like for example, like I think the ace deck is like on big deal is different from the ace deck that's trying to leverage smart fabrics, but it's the same like conceptual idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about. I think my takeaway on HB is they lose a lot of cards. They lose a lot of asset cards. PD loses a lot of power, but mostly like it's like everyone feels the loss of Jeeves. Everyone's gonna feel
Jeeves is a loss felt across many factions.
I guess it's briefly worth saying they do not lose Magnet, even though Magnet is here. That would have been
or
a significant
Ravana.
loss.
Yeah.
We'll
Also,
get to... Sorry, go ahead.
clone suffrage movement is worth calling out. It's been banned forever. Probably most players who have joined during the Nisei era don't know what it does. But it's an important, busted combo piece that we now don't have to design around.
Okay. Let's talk about NBN. So we lose Sensi Actors Union, which doesn't really matter because that card's been banned. It was probably never going to come off the ban list. I think the two big ones in NBN is you lose Exchange of Information, and you lose Salem's Hospitality as are the sort of two big pieces I see. So Exchange of Information is a big one. It's sort of like it's really the premier NBN tag punishment that isn't kill, I would argue, besides Psycho. And it's just like one of those cards that like it's like a win condition. You build your entire deck around Exchange of Information, right? Like you construct your agenda suite in such a way to take advantage of this card. And there's sort of like people have been saying that like Backroom Machinations is like the same thing.
I don't think anyone's quite been saying it's the same thing. I think they've been saying it's a near but like weaker version.
Yeah, but like I just think that Backroom Machinations is like at least 10 times worse than Exchange. In reality.
Is Backroom the one that the new card?
Yeah,
it's the
you spend a tag to get tags to get agenda points.
So that is capped at a single agenda point swing, right?
Yes.
But EOI, if you're exchanging a food for a 15 minutes, is a 4 agenda point swing.
Yeah.
I think EOI is the single most impactful rotation that we're looking at today.
You think it's more than Jeeves?
Yes.
That's so interesting.
Because it's an entire archetype. Like asset decks can exist without Jeeves. Some of them have in the past. Like there are plenty of good Garen builds that aren't running Jeeves. But EOI decks are a deck that runners need to have a game plan for that now they just never need to again.
Sure. Well, you have to leverage your tag. You have to do Psycho. You have to like you just like can't do this thing of like, oh, I'm gonna public trail, like land you one tag, do something. Like one tag now just kind of isn't that great. Like what do you do on like what do you do if the runner has one tag now?
Crash their console.
Very little, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just,
I mean, like
it has to be 2 to 3 tags because like you can't close their accounts.
Yeah.
You can't exchange their information. So it's just like, okay, I guess we have to have 2 or 3 tags so we can market forces them, or we can Psycho, like it's tough.
Yeah.
The
other card I will shout out, it's never actually been good, but people have always wanted this card to be good, which is Navi Mumbai City Grid. And like it's a little bit sad because this card would actually stuff the endurance. So maybe it would finally have its time to shine.
That is so very sad, isn't it?
I also think Salem's Hospitality is a good shout just because it's one of those cards that it's not been good recently. It's just a really powerful effect.
It's been an important tech card in a lot of decks.
Yeah,
in a lot of metas.
It's like sort of like one of those things is like as knowledge about the opponent's deck goes up and the player skills goes up, it's like called shots with Salem's. I mean, like I remember like it wasn't like a year ago people were playing like Salem's, I think in like GameNet or whatever, just to call APOC.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was sick. So yeah, I think as a whole, we're gonna get to this because I think NBN loses a lot of other. It's really interesting because CTM loses a lot of other pieces. Like I think CTM's kind of dead on arrival for this set personally.
Demonetized.
Maybe, but exchange like they lose that, and then also like this like Ismari 6 like QPM deck, they lose exchange information, which is the way you win the game. So I think there's kind of this question of like, man, if we're NBN, like what are we like what's the like how are we gonna win games? It may be something Providosed. I think that's not in the scope of this video. But it's just like, yeah, they have to figure the old stuff is not gonna work, is my view.
Pretty much there is no pre-existing NBN archetype that you just can play on day one and say, oh, I got a new card.
Harrier Buster is slightly relevant, isn't it? That was an NBN, a CTM archetype that, well, that they also can't do anymore.
Yep. No, it's rough.
I will shout out very quickly, Puppet Master rotates. I do kind of want to see the Puppet Master Providosed deck. But...
no. Halagoda Real TV rotates.
That card does nothing but generate salt.
I've never seen that in a... Oh yeah, it was played in, what was it, Scorpius, just to trash something off their deck and try and get lucky.
Or the barriers, or the breakers, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just imagining playing this... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Aryabatatech is another prison card that rotates.
Yeah.
And also
it says to CPM, you have even less stuff you can try and do.
The full immersion Rex Studio, technically with like Trieste model Bioroids, would be a funny deck. But anyway, let's keep going on to more relevant meta cards. Did you want to do Weyland next or Jinteki next?
We'll do Jinteki. So let's talk about Jinteki. I think there are sort of three big cards out of Jinteki. Polana, Bioethics Association, and political dealings. So let's just talk about Polana first. Rodham, because you're from the UK, would you like to explain Panic Polana to the crowd?
Yeah, sure. I guess it's just it's a deck you play when you don't know what to play for a tournament, so you're just panicking and you just pick up Polana because it's always going to be at least okay. That's Panic Polana.
In this case, it does refer to playing Polana as like just a straight Glacier rather than Grinder Polana.
Oh yeah, it's a scoring deck, sort of rushy Glacier. And
do you, with Polana rotated, what do you think the next Panic deck will be?
Oh, Panic PD. How about Panic PD?
Panic PD, God, he doesn't miss. That's so good. I think Polana, it's bad. It's rough. Jinteki's been in a rough spot for a while, and it's kind of like, you know, like kicking someone while they're down. Is how I think about Polana rotating. It's hard to say because at the time of the recording, we haven't seen a lot of the Jinteki cards from this set. We know that based on like what Juna said in the Shadownet episode, that like it's gonna be focused more on like kill and like fucked up shit. I don't know what that means, but like broadly, I think in terms of like the card, we've seen anemones from the set. We haven't seen really anything.
One thing we know for sure is that with MT Band and the current card pool, Jinteki IDs are just at a major power level disadvantage compared to other IDs.
What can you play? What's even legal to play?
Well, so Ag Infusion is kind of, if you're trying to play a slow scoring deck that people are gonna mess up against because they forget what your ability does, Ag Infusion is there. Otherwise, I guess, what's it? The bad Polana, Restoring Humanity, which is a smaller deck. You can try and play something rushy out of that. I don't really believe in it.
Does the Jinteki Agenda Suite allow you to take advantage of the smaller deck size the way, say, in Asmari you used to be able to with SSL?
You can
you might be able to with like Send a Message, Oboe, and then like
amazing. You're giving up on
one pointer somewhere
as well.
Exactly, yeah. So anyway, I don't think a 40 card Jinteki ID is as powerful as a 40 card NBN ID or PD, for example.
I also think like when I think about Polana, like I think conceptually about the factions and how they make money. And I look at Weyland, I'm like, okay, in Weyland you have like Too Big to Fail, which is like a really busted econ card. You have like Wall to Wall, and like you have just like cheap cards. In NBN you have Daily Quest, right? And you also have like the CTM asset thing, which is whatever. But you have Daily Quest, which is like a pretty solid econ card. And then in HB you have just like the campaigns, and then also like Tranquility Grid and like all these aggressive cards.
And the
then when I
ability to
look at-
score out at very low credit totals.
Exactly, like seamless launch. And so when I look at Jinteki, I'm like, how does this faction make money? It's
Yeah.
Celebrity Gift, and what's the 5-cost operation from
Hansei
Say
Can't
Review.
say it.
Yeah, and say review.
Hansei Review? So Hansei Review and Celebrity Gift, and
You play Regolith, honestly, in some Jinteki
But-
Glaciers.
but that's tough. You know what I mean? Though, like I
Yeah.
think that sort of belies the point, where it's like, you were playing Polana a lot of the time because you needed the money, and
Yeah.
Restoring Humanity, I think, is your next best bet, but I don't think it's as strong as Polana. Although it's possible. So there's that new Jinteki, I think it's plus strength on archives. Right? What's it called?
Yeah. I know what you
Bathymus,
mean.
I think, or
forget the
something.
name.
I want to call it its playtest name, but I'm not.
Yeah, I
supposed to
know
do
what
that.
you mean.
No,
But you're not
let's,
meant to.
hold on.
No,
We'll-
let's just call it Neurokatana Crick style.
Sure, Neurokatonic
no,
Kick style.
Bathymus.
Bathymus. So
Anonymous.
Bathymus, I think Bathymus will make actually Restoring Humanity
Yeah, that's true.
markedly better. I think having some sort of archives threat that like is meaningful, and like Neural Katana for 3 on archives, I think is just actually good enough. So I think that's something to watch out for. But I think the if Jinteki has 2 sort of main themes running through, which is Reg Glacier and net damage, Polana rotating is a big hit to the theme of Glacier, which is I think it's just something to point out. And I think most Glacier decks are going to be in HB or NBN instead of in Polana, instead of in Jinteki.
Which is the case up till now as well, right?
Well-
People have not really been doing it in
Yeah.
Jinteki.
In like the
a
last
while.
year for sure, but like Panic Polana
Historically.
was a thing even like in 2020, I want to say, or I guess like pre-Gateway it was a thing. So
The other 2 ones are Bioethics Association, Political Dealings. I mean, I think this is just I think it's what Rob said, right? Like everyone loses assets. Political Dealings is one of those cards that is like it's a kind of a win condition. Like Political Dealings, Flower Sermon, like it gets around Clot. There's a point where Jinteki had more 2/3s in the format, so it was really good with the 2/3s.
Also, political dealings hasn't really been playable since RP got banned,
yeah,
Yeah.
or
I agree
well,
with that.
quote unquote banned since it got moved out of system update.
Yeah, I agree with that. I just think it's sort of like
and
I
honestly,
always
most
wondered if
political
there's a
dealings
political
decks
dealings deck
also
in
had Jeeves. Like it was.
Oh, for sure.
and then Bioethics Association has not been good recently. But like it's just a win. It's just a way to win the game, right? It's like, oh, if you can keep these bioethics alive, you can just ping the run it down. It's another prison card that rotates.
Mhm.
But I just think it's sort of like these cards weren't being played in Jinteki anyway because the faction is in a really rough spot.
Yep.
I just think
Yeah.
it's worth noting that like, okay, well they lost win conditions, so it's like it's kind of like pulling the rope up and like they're trying to climb out. You know what I mean? Like they're trying, but like if you just keep taking win conditions away, it's tough. I also want to shout out
and like just for I know we've said this in the recording already, but just like explicitly, like we're recording this before basically we've seen any Jinteki cards in this next set, but this will probably be published after more of those are out. But
I also think voter intimidation is kind of a big deal. So here's my thesis on voter intimidation. Caldera is a really good card. Voter intimidation was one of the only ways to trash Caldera, and the runner could do nothing about it.
Yeah, now
Um,
you've got to splash retribution. Or wait, is it called retribution? What's
no.
Scape net?
Gape net.
or is it
Gape
Scrape
net.
Net?
Yeah.
But you have to have a money lead for Script Net. Now it is a Trace 7, but
No, not scrape net. No. You tag them with your snare, and they don't trash it because they're a good player and they know that they don't need to respect any tag punishment out of Jinteki. And then you play Retribution,
which
and
only targets programs and
oh,
But you can just
Right.
trash the Caldera
But you just
straight
do it
up.
with the basic action ability.
And they're a good player, so they kept the tag, so you could do that.
wheels within wheels, my friends.
But
I just think
ScapeNet
that, like,
is the like closest you can do.
Yeah.
I just think it's like, if we think about Jinteki Grinder, like, okay, I know people don't like Jinteki Grinder. I like winning tournaments, so I'm going to talk about Jinteki Grinder. One of the things that deck needs is a if it becomes popular, is a way to deal with Caldera. And historically, that has been to play Voter Intimidation, because you can just play a side game and, like, you can loop the Voter Intimidation with Spin Doctor, Preemptive, and Archive Memories, and you just basically get into the cracks. And usually they don't have a way to prevent the Caldera from being trashed, so you just do that, and then the game gets a lot easier. Now, if they have a Caldera, it's like, okay, that's like, you have to scrape net it, which is a lot worse, and you have to spend influence on it. So I think Voter Intimidation actually makes Grinder as an archetype in Jinteki a little more fragile, because you don't have a way to interact with Caldera.
But what's interesting is that none of the latest Grinder lists have even bothered with tech for Caldera, because no one's playing Caldera.
Because that's why I think that's because. So it's an interesting. I think it's an interesting thought. I broadly think that's because there aren't enough tournaments or enough big tournaments where people are incentivized to bring really good Corp decks like Grinder, and the archetype hasn't been explored, because you could just play PD. And I think that in a more developed and mature meta, where, like, people realize, oh, Grinder actually is better than PD or something, and so then people have to start bringing tech, like, you lose this piece of counter tech, which means I think it's harder for Grinder to sort of, like, reach a spot where it's tier 1, because it has actually really strong counters now, if that makes sense.
And there's no doubt to me that this last meta that we're about to leave was very, very underexplored.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I think that, like, we're talking about, like, after the World's Banlist update, like the post World's Banlist update where they unbanned.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think that there wasn't any reason, like, there was just no incentives to explore it. And I think like Soccer 234 won US Nats on Grinder, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me. Just because the format's underexplored, and, like, I think also there's an amount, like, I'm guilty of this too. I think there's a certain amount of groupthink about PD and Big Macs.
Yeah, PD is completely bonkers. But like the Asmar EOI list, I think it was at best tier 1.5, but if that's in the meta, it pushes runners in a different direction, and
No, exactly. Okay, let's get talking about Weyland.
Do we have to?
Yeah, we do have to. So
they lose a couple of really important cards, actually.
What is Zealous Judge?
That's a great
Zealous
question.
Judge.
Yes, Zealous Judge is banned. CU is not banned. Jeff, what were you saying?
No. I was trying to remember Zealous Judge was banned.
So,
I was just saying, like, there's actually a lot of really important Weyland cards. There's like 3 really important Weyland cards at least.
3 big hits are Commercial Bankers Group, Dedication Ceremony, and Consulting Visit.
Yeah.
Correct. Those are the ones.
So Bankers is, like Rob said, everyone loses assets. I think, so this is good in Gagarin, but Gagarin rotates anyway. I think actually the person in Standard who feels this the most is CTM.
CTM, without a doubt.
This is the best one. This is like this is the best decon card in CTM, straight up. It made you profit on the turn you rezzed it. They had to go and trash it. You could put it behind. You could put it on a Mumbad virtual tour. Put it like I was about to say put it behind ice. I'm so dumb.
Yeah, I heard that.
It's just the thing about Bankers is you have to have a way to protect it. I think it's ironic because I don't think it's going to have massive meta implications beyond CTM, but it's a massive, like, it's a big blow for CTM because that deck already is pretty poor, and so it feels like a massive blow. Dedication Ceremony is a really interesting card. So it's been used as a fast advance piece with reconstruction contract, but also the reason why I think it's been it's like, so the meta implications is it has combos with OB, right? Where like
Right.
my understanding of how this works is reconstruction contract, you can trash it, and then you have to have a valid target for the advancement tokens to move, and then you can tutor a zero cost card, and then you can put the advancement tokens on the zero cost card that you tutor.
Correct.
That's correct.
And so, like, there's some like lines of like, oh, we can dedication ceremony, like a reconstruction contract, and if they don't run and trash it, then we get to like tutor a clearinghouse, for example.
That seems way worse than just scoring agendas and winning the game, but I think that is a play.
Sure.
Yeah,
I also think the dedication ceremony worked with City Works Project, and like it was good for like those style of like punitive decks. Yeah, I think Rikoko dedication ceremony was also like a tier 3 combo deck played out of Asa. It's just like a solid operation, and then consulting visit is a big hit for a lot of different Corp decks. So it was a an alliance card, which meant you could splash it at no cost if you had 6 different Weyland cards in your deck. Sorry, not 6 Weyland cards in your deck. Period. It's a really big deal because it allowed you to essentially play these like toolboxy style of Corp decks where like you have like one of like tag punishment or like one of kill card, and like you can play consulting visit and it's like any card in your deck. You can't do that anymore, which means that like those decks, either like decks that play like one of tech cards, are going to become more inconsistent, or they're going to have to play more, which means they have to cut like econ or ice or something elsewhere. So I think broadly it makes a lot of like decks that rely on operations, which are like historically kill decks, it makes them more inconsistent, or
EOI decks.
The structure. Yeah, or EOI decks. Like this was like Consulting Visit was played in Asmari very happily. Especially because like the kill cards like booms, for example, like counted towards your consulting visit count. Exactly. I think outfit's gonna feel this a lot. I feel like actually. Just
the
being
outfits
able like
I've been seeing, I haven't been building outfit lists, but the ones I see in the wild seem less and less to be on hard hitting.
How do they win?
They don't frequently.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, dude.
Fast advance, I guess.
Something like that. Mumbad
Okay.
City Hall rotates. Who wants to explain why Mumbad City Hall has been banned for the last 4 years?
So it turns out that tutoring and installing a card from your deck is very powerful.
Yeah, no kidding.
Brought to you by the OB game.
Just yeah.
Mumbad City Hall has such a checkered history. Like there used to be the Heritage Committee ruling where like you could like you'd click search for Heritage Committee. Like this is before, like you historically a long time ago when Dan Nugent was winning world championships and mammoths roamed the earth. You could spend a click to search for Heritage Committee, and you would look at the top cards of your deck and decide, oh, do I actually want to like play the Heritage Committee and draw these cards or not? So you would look and then decide the card you want to play, and then you would play the Heritage Committee, draw the cards, and then shuffle. And so they changed it. They had to change the ruling so that the Mumbad City Hall the shuffle would fire before you played the card, because you would just like get incredible agenda control with Heritage Committee. You would essentially like never agenda flood out. Also, like you could use this to tutor 3 museums of history, which was like a thing because museums of history was not unique originally. By the way, just like it's fucked. Yeah, I think we want to talk about the neutral Mumbad cards. So Cyberdeck, sorry, not Cyberdeck. Cyberdeck is Order Chaos.
Corporate sales team.
Okay, how good is this agenda in the world of Off-World Office?
Not
if
very.
If Pad Tap didn't exist, I think that there's still an argument to be made for it. But like decks are so fast, you want the 7 credits now more than you want 10 credits later.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it too. And then, Mumbad Temple's a big hit, right?
Yep.
It's an asset that Asa wanted to play, CTM wanted to play, Gagarin wanted to play. Everyone wants to play Mumbad Temple. It's just recurring money for assets and like resing ice. So like if we like look back and look, okay, so we've lost We've lost Jeeves. We've lost Bankers. We've lost Mumba Temple. How the fuck does our CTM deck make money?
No.
It's bad. It's rough waters for CTM. I think of all the decks, CTM is going to feel this the most because Gagarin's rotated and Asa can play other econ cards in the slots because they have access to more campaigns.
NEH, I guess, is going to miss it, but again, NEH just has built-in draw and can find more money over the course of the game.
Exactly. CTM also loses Mumbad Virtual Tour, which was one of your biggest punishments and threats, and has been like a thing you have to play around in CTM forever.
Yep.
You can't do that anymore. Like, I don't know what you do in CTM. And then I think the other one is Vanilla. So like losing Vanilla is kind of a big deal in my view because it was one of the cheapest gear check. It's the cheapest good gear check ice in the game. Like there's a time period where PD was playing this as like a one of, just because like zero cost and the run's really good.
I think it's also worth noting that the existence of Vanilla and as a barrier that rounds out the cheapest available gear check suite. So like you play Enigmas, Vanillas, and like what's the rig shooter one? What's the Sentry? It's an HB 1 influence
Roto
4 res. Thank you, Roto Turret. Yeah, it just wasn't coming out of my mouth. Yeah, so like you play some combination of those ice and a few other gear checks, but basically everything says end the run and is as cheap as possible. And without the existence of Amakua, runners actually have a very difficult time interacting with your rush plan. But with Vanilla gone, I think it's conceivable that we're going to see Nisei looking at Amakua ban more seriously.
Yeah, I think Amakua, like when we talk about winners and losers at the end, I think Amakua is going to be a big winner.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do the runner side for Mumbad.
Wait. We forgot to mention the shuffling is my win condition.
Oh,
Museum of History, was that banned or not?
We can have a moment of silence.
Yes, Museum of History has been banned forever,
okay.
But now it's permanently banned. It's going to the place where all bad Corp cards go eventually.
That's fine.
I recognize it's bad for people, but I really do miss that card. I just have so many like formative memories of playing Netrunner. Like it's like one of those things where it's just like I know it's like I'm in law school. I understand like ethics and like professionalism and all this shit. But it's just like there was just a period of time where I was playing and I was so happy playing Netrunner and I was just playing Museum of History all the time and it was so good. Like I'd show up to my local with Museum of History, my opponent would sigh. I'd be like, I just got to shuffle, dude. I remember practicing. I remember going to Worlds and in the car ride to Worlds practicing shuffling in the backseat.
I just think it's such a missed opportunity that in a set that has a card called Pad Factory, they didn't choose to call it Sad Factory.
We gotta get the Nisei lore heads on that one. Fucking Christ. Okay, run aside. Let's talk about Criminal. Criminal loses a lot of the key cards for what I'm gonna call a weird deck, or like sort of like a not just reg Crim. So they lose Tech Trader and Spy Camera. Spy Camera less so, but Tech Trader is basically like the fundamental econ engine for all of the like trash card synergy deck. Trash can symbol cards in Criminal. So that deck
originally Geist and now out of Az.
Yeah, and like I would say out of Geist, it was one of the best decks in the game.
Yes,
maybe the best. Out of Az, I think it's like a solid like tier 2.5 runner, maybe tier 2 runner. I think it's a little underexplored. But it's solid.
A fun take. It's a fun take on a prison runner, as opposed to a very, very boring take on a prison runner.
Yeah, I think it's just sort of like it's just sort of losing Tech Trader is like all these cards are sort of recontextualized as like they're just not as good.
They're just they're just unplayable now.
Boomerang is still very good, but you weren't playing Boomerang because of the trash can synergy. You're playing because it's a really good card. But like, I think it's hard, for example, to find like a place for Masterwork. Hard to find a place for Q Loop.
I think some people will still be able to do some things with Q Loop, but
it's tough, man. Like, what do you like? I think not getting the rebate is rough.
Yeah.
I don't know. You like criminal
Q
also
loop.
loses.
What
Sorry,
I was gonna say is just like Q loop draws you a specific card from your deck, and like gives you information, and like it is just a baseline pretty good card. Like it's card advantage and card selection, and it's not very expensive to use. But yeah, I agree with you. It's going to be really clunky, and it's quite possible that there is no home for it.
If you're playing a reg Crim deck, the only significant card you lose here is Polop, isn't it? Which has a pretty adequate replacement with the new cards anyway.
Exactly right. Yeah.
I guess black file, marginally relevant for like
well,
one.
You can't charge the black file anymore. That's disappointing.
For prison decks, another prison card gets rotated.
I think that there's some joke in here about how they printed Jailbreak in the last set, but they really should have printed Jailbreak in this set. I think if you're a reg Crim player, like if you're just like, I want to play like Sable, like reg Crim, I also want to play like Steve reg Crim, you don't care about this rotation for criminal cards. I think you care about rotation because Turning Wheel rotates, and we'll get to that when we get to neutrals. But I think for like the Crim cards, you're like, I don't really care. You have Mongoose rotates, we're Bagulta Gang Rise Up. You've got a fucking handgun, just pop a cap. Like, it's fine.
Yeah, none of this stuff matters.
Okay, let's talk about Anarch. So Anarch is in a similar spot where I feel like they just lose a bunch of weird stuff. So Salset Slums has been a tech card that's been played in a bunch of different decks historically. It wasn't played for a while recently, but Big Max was played in Big Max. Bagat is another like weird disruption tech card. Fear the Masses is like a tier 4 combo deck.
Street Magic has been a tier 4 tech card.
Street Magic, yeah. Laura's going to be disappointed.
Yeah,
EMP device as a DDoS replacement never really did anything, but like, you know, it was flavorful. It's a bomb.
Political greed.
Another bomb no longer in the meta.
Run
Is a bomb? Is a bomb? Wait, what? Does the bomb some type?
Yeah, device is a bomb. I think Run Amok is like maybe slightly more relevant. Although I never saw it in any great decks. But
it's a sabotage event, and you could have played in the sabotage deck for theme.
The theme, yes, they took it. Yeah, they don't want it confusing people, so it's probably.
we're like currents. We're just rotating all sabotage cards are now banned, so that people are very clear about what sabotage is.
And then Fear Them Asses.
It's not good.
Yeah, there's not much here, is there? Not really much here that anyone like slums, but yeah.
Cool. So we can move on to the fictional faction in green.
Let's talk about Shaper.
Shaper, yeah. So did they lose anything?
Two big
out of the ashes.
Out of the ashes.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah, because it's like Out of the Ashes was, in my view, one of the reasons why you were in Shaper to play APOC. Because you just play through
or even to play Deep Dive. I'd rather be splashing it out of faction now than playing it in faction.
Oh, I didn't think about Deep Dive. Yeah. Or just play Deep Dive. You're right. It's better in Deep Dive. Yeah, you would play this card more now than I think you have historically. It was played in the last meta just because of APOC, but yeah, I think it's a big hit. Out of the Ashes is just a really powerful card. It's just extra clicks, right? On a turn you need it. The other big hit I think is Artist Colony. Hasn't been as good since fans. Yeah, you're right. It's not as big as Out of the Ashes. I think it's just worth noting that it's a tech card that's not in the game anymore. There's way for the runner. There's no way for the runner to forfeit agendas.
And then Jasminder, the ID that got developed into the dirt so that CTM would be good.
Oh yeah. Also, like, does Jasminder work with Funhouse yet?
Yes. So if you don't have a hunting grounds, Funhouse is just a hard end the run.
Yeah.
Works though.
So that's still kind of broken, isn't it?
Oh, that's pouring out for your girl.
I had a really funny game though versus someone who was on Jasminder with hunting grounds, and so I thought I was really clever by playing a remote with 2 fun houses on it, and then they hunting ground the first, take the tag from the first one, from the first subroutine, and then go to the second one. And I'm like, what's your plan now? And then they just took the tag because Jesminder had already procced, and I just auto conceded.
That's perfect.
It was very funny.
Let's talk about neutral runner cards. So there's a couple big ones, 2 really big ones. So first
Corporate
is Rebirth.
scandal.
Rebirth
Councilman.
has been a 1 influence permanent sneak door beta in Anarch forever.
Yep.
It's been played in every Anarch deck since it was released. It's really good in Val, Hashiko, Max. It's just good in every fucking Anarch deck, right? Because Omar is such a good pick. And then also you have the flexibility of being like, I'm going to be Quetzal or Ed Kim or whatever. Like, it was just such a good idea.
Or Freedom.
Such a good card. Yeah, Freedom, absolutely. And so it's like, I think with Rebirth being gone, Anarch is in a rougher spot.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think any Anarch deck has to have, and this is gonna sound dumb, but it's like it has to have like a way to win the game, and it can't just be a pile of value anymore.
So Anarch is in a bit of a funny spot because their IDs are split really strongly between generic value IDs, right, like Max or Hoshiko, and then really narrow IDs that just completely stuff particular archetypes. So like Freedom or Ed Kim, and Rebirth has been the glue that makes the faction just so strong because you start in a generic value ID and then you pull out the narrow tech ID that wins the matchup automatically.
Yeah.
And now you just have to play fair Netrunner.
I think it's tough. I mean, like for example, if you're an APOC Anarch, maybe you started Omar. And that's not awful. Like Omar APOC has been an archetype that's had success before, so it's not like out of the question.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just worse than starting in Hashiko and rebirthing in Omar. Sorry, Jeff?
Oh, nothing. No. I did not realize my microphone had disconnected midway through, so I had a couple things I want to say about Shaper cards, but at this point it's irrelevant.
Sorry.
But
no, it's not.
Yeah,
what else is there to say? I mean, they're a joke, so.
No, go back, Jeff.
No, it's all good. It was basically like Artist Colony has not been a card because Fansite has rotated. I'm personally a little sad. Like Panchatantra hasn't been a thing since all of the support cards for it rotated, but was a deck I enjoyed.
Sure.
But like that's why I was like it's irrelevant. But I think also like with all the currents banned, like Freedom Through Equality was a current that saw play, but we've mostly skipped currents entirely, so it's not worth talking about them a ton.
Brahmin Haley was sweet. Do you guys remember that ridiculous pile of cards?
Oh, Circus Haley, the Pacoma special.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite decks.
Yeah.
And then also Ankusa, another prison card, rotates.
Yeah.
Just a few more things on Rebirth. So I think it's like broadly, it's like I think if you're like in the generic value ID and you can't Rebirth, it's like why aren't you just playing Crim? Why aren't you just playing Ray Crim, who has like more efficient cards?
Exactly. You have better card draw, better breakers, and better disruption.
I think I think like the reason you might play Anarch is like, oh, you have access to like Stargate plus Hippo, or like you have access to like Chisel Devil Charm, or you have access to Imp, you have access to Sabotage, which is just a disruptive keyword. And so I think that any Anarch deck is going to be pretty focused, which I think is a good place for the faction to be, honestly. And it's just going to change sort of the tenor of like how you build Anarch decks. I don't think you can just throw a bunch. I don't think you can just play Val. Well, you can't play Val anymore. But you can't just play Hashiko with a pile of good cards and a Rebirth and be like, I'm going to win the game. It's just not going to happen anymore.
Right. And part of the reason for that is the turning wheel rotates.
Yeah.
Turning wheel is a big deal. So this has been basically the run a win con for every value deck for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
It's just a way for you to turn runs into future accesses. It's like inevitability because you can just like bounce off HQ R&D and get counters. It's really good with a criminal game plan of like, I'm a criminal, I'm gonna get single accesses and like, just like single you to death, and then like go for like a turning wheel on R&D and like C3 cards. That's really good.
It's also good. It's also good with the Anarch game plan of like, I'm going to occasionally poke at centrals, try to lock your remote, and then win.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also cheap, and it's one influence, right? So it's like it's played everywhere.
Yep.
It being gone is a big blow. What does that mean for the game? So I think the runner decks all need to have a game plan now. You just can't have this plan of like, I'm gonna just do nothing and win. With the exception of, I think Criminal might be able to do that because they have just like such good value tools that. Well, actually, I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Rob. Like, like turning wheels rotated. How does your criminal deck? How do you win the game? Because historically, the 4-9 thing was like, oh, you like keep them down, you get the turning wheel triggers, and then like you like burst out to win the game. But now you can't do that. So if you're a Ray Crim player, how are you winning the game, Rob?
Right. So there are going to be two main decks, right? There's going to be the Sable deck that's using the console to turn value accesses into extra accesses. And then there's going to be like basically Steve Prison, where you're completely dedicated to disrupting everything the Corp does. Trash every asset and upgrade, steal every agenda, and make sure that they're so poor that they can't res any of their remote ice. And that's basically your game plan. That might not be viable.
Sure. What about yeah?
And in order to be viable, it might need to run cards like Sneak Door Beta, which traditionally it hasn't had room for in the list or in the MU suite, like the program suite.
Yeah. I think in terms of, I mean, I think Shaper is fine because Shaper was deep diving using Conduit or like whatever anyway. And I think
and I'm sorry, Deep Dive is the win condition of the Sable deck, by the way. I forgot to mention that.
Sure. Okay, so we're splashing for deep dive then. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then I think Anna like is hurt by this, but has access to like Stargate, for example, at the bare minimum. So we can Stargate the core, and that's like not great, but it's something. Shaper, I think, is fine. I think they were playing deep dive or they were conduiting, and they weren't splashed. Many Shaper decks weren't playing turning wheel anyway. I think criminals probably hit the hardest by this just because they don't have an in-faction replacement.
Yeah, without a doubt. And also can't play APOC easily.
Yeah, I think Sable is better at it, but they don't like the problem. It's like an Anarch, you APOC, and then you can Stargate them. In Criminal, you have to spend influence on the Stargate as well, and you have to find it, which is tough.
In Criminal, you APOC them and then legwork them.
Yeah. It's not good. I think the turning wheel. I think one of the most impactful rotations is going to be the turning wheel.
Yeah.
All the runner decks are just going to be more focused, which I think is good for the game, but I think it's also different because it's like you could sit like in the old meta, you could just sit down versus a runner deck, and you kind of know what they're all going to do. They're all going to make some money. They're all going to just like try and like make you res ice on centrals and get some value accesses, and then turning wheel you to death. And that's like 60% of the runner games. And now it's like, okay, you sit down and they install a fucking boat, or they're gonna Stargate you to death, or like they're gonna Hippo Chisel your ice, or they're gonna do whatever. And so I think all the runner decks are gonna have a more focused game plan. We also lose Akshara Serene, our queen. So that's something to think about too.
Councilman,
I was actually
and
going
Paula
to
rotating at the same time.
Yeah.
Sports Hopper, which is slightly relevant for some decks.
Another prison card.
Was it a Sunny card? Was it or
I
Adam?
like how every card that Rob doesn't like is just a prison card. It's like every card he doesn't like, it just gets jailed. It's like a political dissident. It's so good.
Guru Davinder's a prison card as well.
Also true,
Yeah.
but the runners putting themselves in prison.
Yeah.
So that's Mumbad. I want to talk quickly about the ban list update because I think it's worth talking about just because it's going to impact the meta. I think it's useful for thinking about like what might be good in terms of old decks because I don't know about Providos, I don't know about Ob. I think I have some ideas, but I think that's like a sort of a different.
Oh,
video.
hey Eric, I just learned it's not Ob, it's Ope.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, that's. I mean, on whose authority?
On like
on
how it's pronounced.
Yeah, those aren't OB in the English alphabet. Those are whatever those characters are named in the Cyrillic.
It's
So
Ope.
yeah, because consonants at the ends of words are devoiced in Russian.
Do you like the name Ope more than Ob?
It's kind of funny, actually. Ope.
I'm gonna use my oop trigger. My oop trigger.
Oh,
Or
come
like,
on!
No, but I mean more like, oh, there it is.
That's holy fuck. Yeah. Anyway, so let's talk about the ban list update. So the cards that were banned, Sandbox. I'm just gonna pull this up on nisa.net.
Yeah, I've got it. You can also. I'm sharing it on the Discord call, Eric.
Oh, perfect.
Also,
Okay.
also NRDB added. I just want to call this out for anyone who doesn't know. If you go to more at the top of Netrunner database, ban lists is listed, and you can look at all of the historic ban lists as well as
that's
the most recent one.
super cool.
That's
Yeah, it's
awesome.
That's
really,
fantastic.
Do you know who implemented this?
I don't, but I know that Plural is a person who is very heavily involved in developing NRDB, so it's quite possible it's them.
That's awesome.
Yeah, this is fantastic. Okay. Cool.
Uh,
So it's the bans are
Oh, you go ahead, Jeff.
Cyberdeck Sandbox, High Profile Target, Kakugo, Shipment from Tenon, and then Personal Evolution and Fairchild 3 both came off of the ban list.
So, I think one of the things to note about this is no runner cards were banned or unbanned. And so I think a lot of the runner changes were going to look like a lot of the runner discussion in terms of how does this affect runner play is going to be like what cards are better or worse in light of these cards being taken on and off the ban list. So let's talk about Sandbox first, which I think is a pretty big deal. Sandbox has been dominating Standard. It's played in almost any deck that can reliably score. It's played in ASA, was played in CTM for a while, played in like every deck under the sun. It's just a really powerful effect. It also, I think, it's interesting because a lot of Corp decks were not playing it because it purged virus counters, but playing it because it made 4 credits on score, and that you can repeatedly purge and get the money. As a result, I think Amakua was being caught in the crossfire often, where you would have an Amakua with 3 or 4 counters, and then you take a turn off, and they would score Cyberdeck Sandbox, and you'd be back at square one, and that just can't happen anymore. Which means it's a lot easier to keep your Amakua momentum.
Especially because Amakua decks tended to also be Crim denial decks. So not only do they reset your Amakua while scoring 2 points, they also make back the money that they lost from your diversion of funds.
Exactly.
And they're doing it all for 2 credits with seamless launch. So yeah.
I think one of the things is that there's that, and also like because Cyberdeck McStabby is Jinteki in the Jinteki faction cost and influence, I think you're just going to see less of it. It's less easy. You can't just like, I have a slot left over. I need a tech card. I'll just play a Cyberdeck.
Yeah, like ASA lists often were like ASA and PD both were like, I'll include a CVS because it Amakua is a roughish matchup. I'm already playing Sandbox. This just becomes a hedge fund that like I have access to and helps me in a tough matchup. And now they have to pay an influence if they want to do that same thing.
Or I'm more ice focused. I don't need the upgrade slot. I'll play a macrophage.
Yeah.
It's worth noting there's going to be no macrophage, really, is there, with Sandbox gone?
I don't think so.
I think it's pretty much unplayable. The next, so I think the takeaway is that like, I think also it's worth examining an all-in virus deck like with Knobkuri Consume again. I don't think those decks were always like S tier competitive, but with Cyberdecks rotating, they're not getting crossed with Sandbox rotating, they're not getting caught in the crossfire. And so I think it's just something worth thinking about.
They were absolutely reliant on the speed of the max draw to set up. So without max, I just don't think it's viable. I know there was Trash Panda at Worlds 2 years ago, and
it's been played in Freedom on and off as like a tier 2 deck. Let's talk about high profile target. So I think it's a big deal. It makes it essentially makes every kill deck in the game worse. I think specifically in Weyland, you weren't seeing HPT often splashed out of faction. You're mostly seeing Boom splashed, and so I think it's not going to change for those decks because you're just going to keep playing Boom. But I think decks like Outfit have to play Boom now, which I think makes the kill plan shakier, just straight up. I also think the takeaway is that now decks like Counter Surveillance Zaya don't have to live in fear of HPT, because I think what we're stopping taking Anarch is like, okay, you can get the 7 hand size, or you can just like play like Dummy Box plus Mercs and not die to Boom.
But the old plan against Boom for Tag Me Crim was denial, because they have to be on 4. Well, they have to start their turn on 3 and have the Boom in hand, or start their turn on 5 and have the Consulting in hand. Or no, sorry, start the turn on 6 with the Consulting in hand. And that's just not an option anymore.
Yeah, you also have Obelisk, right? So you can just get the extra hand size from Obelisk and survive the Boom that way. Like I think there's a Take Me Crim was
a
doing
lot of counterplay.
Yeah, exactly. Take Me Crim was doing well sort of like a year ago in the summer, and it sort of fell off. And mostly I think because of the rise of Gagarin and just HPT being everywhere is like tough.
But credit HPT has been such a miserable play pattern for so many runner decks.
Yeah, I think the takeaway from HPT is like the kill decks get a bit worse and Tag Me gets a lot better. Let's talk about the next 3 as a set. So Kakugo was banned, Shipment from Tenon was banned, and Jinteki Personal Evolution was banned. Unbanned. So this is kind of a reversion almost of the changes that were made just before the World Championship.
Yeah.
Where basically the justification was given at the time was like, listen, Jinteki's not good. We want to like just try some stuff out and see if we unban these cards. Can like these get played in like a tempo way? Can these get played in a value deck? Like, you know, can Kakugo get just played in Palana? Can we maybe open up some like fast advanced deck?
The theory is Kakugo on Centrals is NPE, right? Whereas Kakugo on a remote is an interesting tempo game.
Yeah, and so I think the answer to the I think the results of the experiment, I don't know what the SPT was thinking in terms of how they thought it went. From my view as a player, I think it was sort of just like it didn't work. And fine, because I think at the time they were like, these are going to be experimental changes. It turned out that like the best way to play the Kakugo and the Shipment from Tenon was in a grinder deck, and like you saw that with Sokka 234's deck he won at US Nationals was a grinder deck that would not have existed if not for Shipment from Tenon and Kakugo. And as a result, there's been a decision to unban Personal Evolution and ban the other cards. So now P is going to be back in the field. What does that do? It's unclear to me. I don't want to speculate too much because we don't know the Jinteki cards. And so it could be that there's like a lot of synergy with P. There's no synergy with P. I think the Jinteki question is a big question mark, and we have to see what the cards do in Midnight Sun.
Making unstealable avocados is the grinder win condition. So the question is just, can
you do that?
Can the Corp deal 40 points of net damage, you know, minus the number of cards the runner has to play to interact, before 2 avocados get stolen?
Yeah. I agree. And then lastly, Fatal 3 is unbanned. This was banned. God, I don't even remember. I think it was banned because there was a PD was just very good.
Yeah, pretty much.
And I think now there's this view that with Sandbox banned, and PD is going to be a little bit worse.
And PD does get hit by rotation a little bit because like Advanced Assembly Lines was actually a pretty key economy card in that list that was like actually pretty hard to replace.
Yeah, so it's losing 2 key economy cards, one of which had a unique effect. Well, both of which did, right? Nothing else does what Cyberdex Sandbox did, and nothing else does what AAL did.
Yeah, and so where's Fairchild 3 going to see play? I think the 2 big winners of this one are PD and Acer. I think you're probably cutting an Ansel and putting a Fairchild 3 in. Like, I think Ansel and... I don't think you can play a deck that plays Ansel and Fairchild 3, straight up. I don't think you have the money for it. I think you could probably... I think Fairchild 3 in Acer is better than Ansel. In PD,
you could probably play one of each, but I don't think you have slots for like 2 of each.
I think you might in the end play 2 Fairchild 3s just because that face check is so good.
Yep.
But
I also
could be
think that
wrong.
like if there is a Jinteki Glacier, say out of RH, it's possible it wants to splash Fairchild 3, or if Ag Infusion is somehow playable.
Ag Infusion's more likely, I think, because it's got more influence and it doesn't need border control in the same way that other
Yeah.
IDs do. So yeah, could see a little bit out of faction, but I think Acer is probably the big winner of it, just because I don't think PD is necessarily going to be that good in this new turtle meta.
Okay, so this
Seamless launch is still just so good, and recurring it to hand. I think the PD is still going to be a deck to reckon with.
So let's talk about winners and losers. Because now we've sort of gone through all the factions and we've gone through the Banlist update. So like, does anyone have any decks that they like are thinking about, maybe thinking about playing before, like old decks that they are thinking about playing again because they've gotten better positionally, or decks that they used to play that like they aren't going to play now because they think they've gotten worse?
Yeah,
I
so
think
the Asmari list that I've been playing for the last couple weeks now just doesn't exist, and I'm pretty sad about that because it's a play style that I really enjoy, and I hadn't been having a lot of fun with Corp in this last meta until I found that list, and oh well, goodbye.
I think Big Max basically doesn't exist anymore. It sounds
Well,
obvious.
Max doesn't. Yeah,
Max doesn't exist, but I also think it's just sort of like, I think there might be this knee jerk of like, what if we just played 60 cards into Hashiko? Hashiko draws a card.
no.
It's not good. It's not going to be good. You don't have Rebirth anymore. I think broadly any sort of value focused. I think value focused decks are going to get worse overall because the Corp decks have like actual win conditions now. But I think more specifically, like value focused Anarch, I think is going to get a lot worse, especially with Rebirth gone and Turning Wheel gone. And so I think if you're playing Anarch, you have to be like, I'm playing Anarch for a specific reason because I want to like, I'm going to win this way. I'm going to sabotage. I'm going to Stargate. I'm going to do whatever.
Yeah, I think the new Anarch ID is going to be the default Anarch ID for a while until the meta settles a bit.
I don't
because it's
think
the most proactive.
I don't think they're quite as bad as all that because I think you can use Turtle a lot more and you can get around your breakers being bad by just forcing the Corp to ice up a lot and purge. I mean, you need to make them care about archives, right? Because you don't have Rebirth, and Turtle is like the obvious way to do that.
Why not
and
be
then,
criminal? Why not be criminal?
Good question. Probably Hippo is the best reason.
Sure.
But you might be right. It might just be better done by Crim. That remains to be seen.
But well, because Crim doesn't have a win condition right now, you have to splash for either deep dive or Stargate. It's not Stargate.
I think I think that's a deck that I'm going to really focus on is Reg Freedom. So
yeah,
one of the decks historically that's been good, like 2 years ago, was Freedom. You just play like Turtle Amakua and like Yusuf, and you just like get accesses in Stargate. You don't have Turning Wheel anymore, which I think is tough. So I think you have to play Stargate. Maybe you're playing Docklands Pass or something. But
I don't think you're playing Stargate out of Freedom just because you really want to be playing Yusuf.
Sure.
Conduit.
I think you could play you could splash for Conduit. I think it's not. I think it's not incredible, but I think it's not insane. And
so when you say Reg Freedom, I think of crowdfunding freedom from just after Magnum Opus. Yeah, obviously that's banned, but that was the key card in that deck: inject and crowdfunding. So I'll be surprised if Freedom is fast enough, but the ID ability is amazing. Built-in disruption and pseudo multi-access.
It's the strongest Anarch ID in a vacuum, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I just think that like Amakua Sucker is Leech is just such a powerful combo, and it's better, and it fuels that deck, and so I think it's just worth examining Freedom again. It's like, can we make it work? Is there a breaker suite? Maybe it's like, oh, is there a win condition? Let's just figure something out. I also think for me, an archetype that I want to play again. Oh, what was I gonna say? Holy fuck! Oh, an archetype I want to play again is Asa. I want to play Asa again. So I think Big Deal is actually a good way for Asa to close the game because I think as Asa you can get to 4 pretty fast and then you just stall. Because
Eric, isn't Mad a really good win condition for Asa. I mean, I guess you have to splash your boom or whatever too, so it becomes a lot of influence. But Asa's really good at playing and rezzing lots of cards.
So the thing about Mad, I'm like, I don't know how Mad decks win the game. This is gonna sound really dumb, but it's just like, is the plan with Mad you just get to like 6 res and then you just like trash 6 res cards and give them 6 tags?
Yeah, right? Or 8, really.
8. Well, no, 6, because then if they clear 4, they're on 2 and you kill them.
Right, but misdirection exists and Citadel still exists. So I think
Sure,
like
but,
against Shaper, you're going for like 12 tags if you can.
But that 12
which
res, 12 res cards is a lot of fucking res.
Oh
cards.
no,
Yeah.
it's absurd. I'm not saying like against Shaper, you may just not have a game plan.
You might score out. I mean, I think maybe the plan of the Ace is like you have the Mad Boom as like a secondary win con. You're flexible and you're just like playing.
Right, which is Mad wound up at 4 influence, right?
Yeah.
So you just got a 7 influence 2 card kill combo in your
fragile, though.
efficient scoring deck. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but
That's fragile.
Boom is trashable.
Yeah. And like you don't get to splash good cards like Border or Void or whatever else you were
You can't
splashing
keep
in
them out
the
of the remotes.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the thing about Ace is just like I look at Big Deal. Big Deal costs $17.
Yep.
How do we make that much money? I think the answer is fully operational.
Yeah.
Yep,
I
fully
think-
up good econ assets that are forward tempo, like Maryland and Nico.
I think there might be a chance you play Refuge campaign and you just like turtle up and just like because Refuge campaign is
Wow.
like 2 pads. I think it's possible.
I think it's
That
okay.
sounds so slow.
We've tried it a couple of games with
Yeah.
it, and I think it's. I mean, you just leave it there, right? You're not really turtling up. You just sort of install it behind Gatekeeper and just say you don't want to deal with this.
Yeah,
And
I've
just
actually
make
like
Next, I
money
want
off
to
it.
deal with it.
I've only played like we've only played 3 games, and it's like
Yeah.
having the runner say, "Oh, I have to go and trash a 4-cost asset behind a piece of ice" it can be kind of brutal.
It's
It's-
relevant. It's a relevant
But,
card, I think. Yeah.
But that's been the game for a long time. Like ice your Mumba temples or ice your Jeeves, you know? Like runners know how to runners are built to do things like get past 1 piece of ice and trash a 4 or 5 cost asset. Like if you come across a runner that doesn't have a game plan for that situation, then you've come across a bad runner.
I think Crim is the best at dealing with those problems, Rob, compared to Shaper.
And Crim loses the most. That's a fair point.
No, I'm not saying no. I'm not saying no. I'm not. I think you're right, which is that like good runner decks can contest these things. I think like of the 3, you're gonna play against all 3 factions. It's like that maybe the refuge campaigns are the worst against Criminal. I think that's true, but I think they have a better against Anarch and Shaper. Like I think Anarch and Shaper has a hard like. Anarch and Shaper
Right,
can't
but
play Miss
Shaper still has access to Clot, right, which stuffs your big deal. So then you need to be splashing for the new CVS.
My version of I guess the boat. The question is how good is the boat? My version of Asa is running like border controls or something, or maybe you splash Anonic Void and like you have this like. I don't think Big Deal is the win condition. I think it's just the way you can close the game.
Right, and then Anarch. Well, the new ID is built-in hand disruption, and then like Freedom is HQ disruption.
Sure, you think Ace is bad then?
I'm not saying Ace is bad. I'm saying that like your 4-cost 4 trash asset behind 1 piece of ice is not the win condition that you're painting it as.
It's 4
or not the path to a win that you're
it's 4 virus counters out of Freedom. That's compared to 2 for Pad Campaign.
No. But Freedom is just going. Freedom's going to trash your big deal because you have a higher HQ agenda density.
You think they're going to spend 17 virus counters?
No, they're going to spend 3 credits.
I know.
And then they're going to spend 0 virus counters to trash your archive memories.
Oh no.
Yeah. Hitting that archive memories is going to be a pain, but.
Jeff, are there any old archetypes that you're like, I want to try this out?
I mean, I don't think I'll be able to stop myself from trying to play Shaper, even though I don't know that Charge Shaper is like the type of Shaper I've enjoyed the most. Charge Shaper seems kind of like I'm just gonna build up on, like, I'm gonna build up a bunch of boat counters and play some really efficient breakers, and if you haven't won, then I just always get to access cards. I think my favorite Shaper is more toolboxy.
Sure.
So I do
I
think
think
I want
you're.
to.
Sorry, go ahead.
I do want to look at like Freedom. I think is an archetype I'm really excited to try and explore a bit, even though I don't know that he actually gets much of anything. It more might just be that, like, I think Freedom was okay, but like just had like a 20% PD matchup, which just meant he was unplayable. And I'm sort of hoping that between PD losing some key cards, like I think I'm optimistic that like between Shaper and Criminal that like they've gotten enough compelling stuff that PD falls down enough that now I can start to look at the Freedom kind of crowdfunding list, crowdfunding style.
I sort of suspect that news decks are going to be a little bit of a winner here because a lot of the proactive runner game plans encourage like early aggression. And so that may just be like that, on day one of the format, you're going to gotcha a lot of people, but it doesn't have legs because once good players learn how to play around it, they're going to adjust their runner game plan for it. But I don't know. I'm not sure what you're newsing out of. Maybe you're just in 6 agenda as Mari, but with a hard hitting boom package.
I think. Okay, so I think the $1 million question is how much worse is PD?
Yeah,
I think a lot of the runner decks.
I think a fair bit worse, but there are differing views on it. I just think you're not going to get the blazingly fast wins that you did before if you're up against turtle rigs every time. You're going to have to slow down.
You lose sandbox.
Yeah, you're going to have to slow down, purge, do all the stuff you don't want to do when you're PD. And I'm sure it'll be viable in some form, but I'm pretty down on it. It's not one of the first things I want to try. I think Acer will probably be a better. I think the archetype you described has got legs in Acer, and yeah, I just don't know about PD.
I also think one of the Corp decks I think is worth investigating is some sort of Glacier Egg Infusion. Because as I think one of the problems Egg Infusion has is it can like really get outvalued, but it's actually really good at stopping like specific game plans. Because you have Nisei counters, you have the Egg Infusion ability, you have Taxing, Spiky Ice, you do incidental net damage, you probably play Oboe, so they have to lose cards to steal it, so you can lose the deep dives. So I think if you play against Crim, for example, and you like res an enemy and hit the deep dives out of their hand, that's really good.
My experience is that Ag Infusion destroying their own board state in order to stop some like high impact runner event tends to be a good trade off for the runner.
Yeah.
But you don't have turning wheel anymore. Like that. Like I just think the difference is like, historically I agree with you, Rob. It's like they like do some event on HQ, but and then they just turning wheel you to death. But they can't just turning wheel you to death anymore. All they can do is get singles on you, and singles are good. I just don't think it's as bad anymore. Like having open centrals as Egg Infusion, like when you like to stop a Chachushka, to stop a deep dive, I think is less bad than it was historically.
Yeah. And you just need to sort out the money, I guess, in Ag Infusion, don't you?
But
You
also Eric, you're not using the Ag Infusion to stuff the deep dive. You're guessing, like basically you're wondering, is the runner bluffing? Is this third run, because you've got to stuff the important run, not the last click, not the click 3 run archives run, right?
Yeah. I just think that like it's worth I think Egg Infusion's on my it's worth investigating list.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I don't mean to sound like a total doomer.
No, it's just discourse.
I guess I should say thanks everyone for. Yeah, I can do the outro I guess on my own, but thanks everyone for swinging by. It was great to have everyone talk about rotation and like. Obviously, when we're just talking about rotation, not all the new cards, like it's gonna feel like we're losing everything, and I think we get some fun new toys, but that'll have to be a whole separate video.
Yeah, I'm
exactly.
excited for Midnight Sun. Like, I'm really excited for Midnight Sun. I'm definitely not like down on the set because we're losing cards. I just think it's important to like we're all competitive players, and so I think it's important when set rotation happens to like have a critical eye and be like, oh, what's good, what's bad. I think this is a really large meta shakeup, and
Yeah, and we're looking mostly at things that people are losing, but also there are the positives. And I tried to call it out every time I saw a prison card that's getting rotated. So,
which was every runner card you didn't like.
yeah,
I think I'd like I think another video you could do, Jeff, is like, oh, new decks that come with the set. Like I think I think Providos, for example, is one of the strongest Corp cards in the set, and there will be a really strong Providos deck. I'm not really interested right now talking about the deck because I want to talk about like, oh, what did NBN lose or gain in rotation?
Yeah. No,
Okay, yeah. Thanks for having us on, though.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming on, and yeah, thanks everyone, all of you viewers. Though this is basically a podcast episode, thank you all for listening. And I'm hoping to do a lot of stuff around the release of Midnight Sun, covering all sorts of stuff. So, hang around.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks guys for hanging out, Rob and Patrick.
yeah, this has been a good way to unhangover myself.
Thanks, Jeff, for doing the recording.